Good morning, and welcome to the second installment of the Occidental Jihadcast. I'm Tim Furnish, and I'm going to talk this morning, Dark Hundred this morning, and about a topic that has really been hitting me in the last few days since the murder of Charlie Kirk, and that is the similarity between the movements of leftism, particularly progressive, so-called progressive woke leftism, which has become increasingly violent, as we all know. Those with eyes to see and ears to hear are willing to admit, and between Islam as movements. So there are a great deal, there are four major similarities, I should say, which have struck me, and I want to talk about that. Let me preface this by saying that I did not know Charlie. I did not follow Charlie that closely. You can tell by the gray in my facial hair that I'm not exactly of his generation, but I knew about him, had a great deal of respect for him, and I primarily knew about him because of his help in getting President Trump elected. I had not followed Turning Point USA very closely. I have two sons, one that's just graduated from college and one that's still in college, and they were much more familiar with him, and they both liked him. But that said, I want to say that I have prayed for him, for his soul, for his wife and children, and in my church on Sunday, in my Lutheran church, conservative Lutheran, not one of those crazy Lutherans that they make fun of on Twitter, the crazy liberal Lutherans. In our church, we prayed for him, and we prayed for his family, and we prayed that God would heal the horrible, acrimonious divisions in this country. But we did not hear a sermon that mentioned Charlie Kirk because lectionary readings did not allow really for shoehorning Charlie into that. So I say that because I've seen on Twitter in the last few days a lot of, in particular, evangelical pastors and evangelical Christians saying, well, if your church didn't talk about Charlie, then you should find a different church. Well, I'm sorry, that's a different approach to Christianity to some degree than liturgical Christians have. So anyway, but that said, it's a great tragedy. Charlie was a great young man, a very good Christian, and the very least someone could do is pray for him and his family and try to uphold his legacy. So that said, four major similarities between the movements of leftism and between Islam. The first one is that they are both extremely intolerant. And again, what is the root of woke, so-called progressive leftism? Which I realize is not the entirety, not the totality of the Democrat Party, but you would be hard-pressed to find many people that will take exception to it. The old guard, the Jurassic leadership of that party has never rebuked the left in any meaningful way. They just tried to jump onto that train, and so it's unfortunate. But basically, the Democrat Party is dominated by Marxism, which is the root of so-called progressive woke leftist ideology, and it's very intolerant. It doesn't provoke opposition. It doesn't want to do what Charlie did, which is talk to people. Come, let us reason together. That is not a dictum on the left. I mean, thank God there are still a few Democrats that have a brain, ironically, like Senator John Fetterman, maybe one or two others. But for the most part, that party has just lost its moorings and surrendered in pretty much in whole to Marxism, which is unfortunate. But Marxism is very intolerant. We've seen that throughout history, ever since it was first devised, and the progressive left is exemplified by movements like Antifa, BLM, the transgender ideology. There is no talking to these people. You will like what we're saying, or we will shoot you. So I know people like to call them fascists. I think that's a way overused term in our society. I call them Stalinists. I think the left is Stalinist. And remember, Stalin killed more people than Hitler did. If anyone wants to keep score. Islam is also incredibly intolerant. And sort of a subset of that, both of them have entirely no sense of humor. Islam, famously, Khomeini and other Islamic scholars and leaders throughout history have always basically said that Islam is too serious. The Prophet Muhammad and Allah are too serious matters to ever make jokes about. So, and this is of course very much the case to the left. They have no sense of humor. If you want to test this, look at their memes. They can't, as we on the conservative side like to say, the left can't meme. They can't meme at all. They don't have a funny bone in their bodies. And I think that's a subset of the fact that leftists, like Muslims, for the most part, entirely lack a sense of humor, which right away tells you something's wrong. Number two is that both leftism and as we increasingly see, the trans ideology subset of leftism and Islam are violent. To talk about Islam first, in this case, again, I have a PhD in Islamic history. I've studied Islam for many years. I've written about this many times. If you go to my website, Occidental Jihadists, Occidental Jihadists, singular, there's just one of me, I think. I have links in various blog posts, particularly one I did a few months ago that has links to the 14 articles I've written on terrorism in recent years. I've got other links to my articles specifically on Islam. And again, besides I have a PhD in Middle East history, Islamic history, I also worked at Special Operations Command and initially learned Arabic and Army intelligence. And so I do know a little bit about this topic. And then also I worked for a while at Special Operations Command. Besides working up Special Operations Command as an analyst, I also have written a number of books. So not to throw credentialism at you, but as I pointed out in my first podcast, there's a lot of garbage that's been spewed forth by analysts that don't know what they're talking about since 9/11, and I don't think I do that. You can check out what I write, but I've written a lot about the fact that the primary ideology supporting, buttressing, promoting terrorism in the world is Islam. And it's not this mythical thing called Islamism. I also went into that a bit in my first podcast. There is no such thing as Islamism. There is no such thing as an Islamist. That's a camouflage term, basically, because people don't want to come out and say what we're really dealing with, which is Islam. Jihad in Islam is not an extreme interpretation. It's not a radical interpretation. Islamism is not some sort of weird aberration of political Islam, whereas Islam isn't political. Islam is political. And the Quran promotes violence. The Hadiths, the alleged sayings of Muhammad, promote violence. And 70% of the world's 69 point something percent of the terrorist organizations on the foreign terrorist organization list the State Department puts out are Islamic terrorists. Islam's violent. I mean, anybody, again, with eyes to see and ears to hear can tell this. And the left has become increasingly violent. Particularly the trans ideology, which has become not just supremely intolerant, besides the fact that it's delusional, which I'll address a bit more in a minute, but it's also become violent. I was listening to Megan Kelly yesterday, and she pointed out that in recent years, 7 of the mass shootings that we've had in this country have been by self-professed trans ideologues. And of course, that's the fellow who killed Charlie Kirk. There's clear data, according to the press conference yesterday and according to press releases from the FBI and the authorities in Utah, that this fellow was trans adjacent, if you will. And that, according to allegedly what he said, what he wrote, this is why he decided to kill Charlie. So And of course, recently we had the shooting at the Catholic Church that killed kids and faculty. We had the shooting a year or two ago at the Christian school in Nashville. So, and there are others. I won't go into them, but for the incredibly small percentage of the population that is trans, that thinks they're trans, for that incredibly small population to engage in this many mass shootings, there is disproportionately a problem. And again, why are they so violent? Because they're so intolerant. At least that's one major reason. One might surmise there are others, which I'll address in a moment. But when people are being told that there's a quote unquote genocide, again, sorry, there's also a great deal of lying about this frankly, in the media. There was in the Biden administration where they would say that, trans people are particularly singled out for violence. There's no evidence of that. There never has been any evidence of that. But it was just a talking point for Biden's minions, basically, that they put in front of him, and he repeated it like a parrot because half the time he didn't know what he was doing, and I'm being generous. So when his teleprompter said that, he said it. It's just ridiculous. But this has convinced some people that there's a quote unquote genocide of them. And what do you do when there's a genocide? Well, I would think you would fight back, right? You would try to. So we see a disproportionate amount of violence and larger within the larger ideology of the left. You've had Antifa, BLM was just flat out Marxist. If you went and looked at their documents and their ideology was listed online. So I mean, it wasn't conservatives that burned cities down during COVID. Nope. And notice that no conservatives or Christians are burning anything down in the wake of Charlie's murder. So the violence on the left is there for anyone to see, and it's it ranges from throwing the piles of prearranged, preset bricks at buildings and burning buildings and mostly peacefully protesting like that to killing people. So so that's number two. The left, not just the trans aspect of it, but just the left in general, which again has by and large, because it hasn't been repudiated, come to represent the left in America as a whole. So that ideology and Islam are both very violent. My third thing is that both of them, both the left, capital L, and again, I'm not talking about Democrats that may be union members or old school people like that. But again, I don't know how many people like that are left in the Democrat Party. But if there are very many left, they sure aren't saying much, are they? Because one looking at this, an alien who landed on Earth and surveyed our political situation would think, boy, the Democratic Party sure does seem to support all this stuff. So, and again, a lot of that is Trump derangement syndrome, but we don't have time to go into that. So, but my third point is that both the left and Islam hates Western civilization. In the case of Islam, why? Because Western civilization has been the civilization historically that stood up to them militarily, politically, and religiously. But that's my final point, which I'll get to in a moment. Western civilization stands for things that Muslims simply cannot abide. Democracy, frankly, is one, because the Quran and the Hadiths don't really support democracy. I mean, Muslims will try to cherry pick certain passages and say that the idea of consultation in the Quran means democracy, but it simply doesn't. That's just propaganda. In Islam, the ideal state is one in which Sharia law is enforced, and actually one in which there's a caliph, an Islamic leader of all Muslims in the world. So that's the ideal state, which many Muslim organizations aim for. I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood, for instance, won't use the word caliph, But if you look at their documents, they say that their aim is a Dawla Islamiyah, an Islamic state, Islamic administration. What's Islamic administration based on? Well, not the Constitution and the Federalist Papers, that's for darn sure. Western civilization is the one that came up with the idea that that gay people should be tolerated in society openly, because historically that has not tended to be the case to most civilizations around the world throughout history. The idea that lesbian, bisexual, gay, LGBTQ people have rights and should be able to publicly express them is a Western concept. It didn't come from Confucian China or Brahmin India, or it certainly didn't come from the Islamic world. That's for darn sure. So the ideas that underpin Western civilization, particularly politically, are anathema to Islam, and they are also anathema to the left. Ironically, isn't it? Because where does Marxism come from? It comes from a German guy named Karl Marx, who lived in England for a while and briefly in the United States, who came up with this idea that two of the key elements, perhaps the two key elements of Western civilization, Christianity and capitalism, the two that undergird Western civilization, are horrible and should be done away with. And so that's, the Democrat Party used to not be like this, but the Democratic Party over the last 30 years, 40 years, has increasingly imbibed at the well of Marxism. And now you've probably seen some of the surveys and data that an incredibly large number of Democrats, particularly young ones, are in favor of socialism. And to go back to my earlier point, also there's been some recent data that has come out, studies done that show a large number, not as many, but a large number, I believe the figure was 25% of Democrats, under the age of 30 or 40, believe that it's acceptable to kill people and use violence against people you don't like, whereas it was 25% is not a majority, but it's unfortunately too large. Much more accepted than the number of people on the Republican side that are willing to say say it's okay to use violence against people you don't like or don't agree with. So, but anyway, to get back to this point number 3, which is both the left and Islam despise Western civilization. I mean, how many times have we seen this? Western civilization, the left says, is irredeemably tainted. I mean, oh my God, we had slavery. Do these people not know that slavery has been a staple of human history across cultures, across space and time? And it was actually the West, starting with the British, that got rid of slavery. Did they not know that we fought a war here and killed more Americans in that conflict than any other conflict we've ever fought in, including World War II, to get rid of slavery? I guess they don't know that, or they don't care. The left, and of course, ironically, we have the left, particularly particularly the LGBTQ and the trans community, with the rainbow flags and all of that, practicing their intersectionalism, and you see these rallies where they have pro-Palestine rallies, and they've got LGBTQ flags, and do they not know what would be their fate under Islamic law? It's just either these people are incredibly stupid, or they're just incredibly mendacious, or could be both. But either way, they have no idea what they're talking about, and why anyone takes them seriously, I don't know. But of course, a reflection of that is that many people in the media are of the same ilk, stupid and or liars. So they cover for them. So that's number 3. Both the left, the Marxist left, the Marxist woke progressive left, despise Western civilization and want to change it into something else or bring it all down. And like Alfred told Batman in The Dark Knight, some men just want to see the world burn. And you've got a lot of that on the left. Number 4, why is it that so many on the left want to see Western civilization burn? And why do so many Muslims want to see Western civilization burn? And let me quickly say, I realize that there are 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, and not all of them are terrorists, and not all of them want to see Western civilization burn. My point is that Islam as a religion and an ideology certainly does, because the Quran and the Hadith say basically Muslims are to fight until the entire world submits to Islam. That doesn't sound very tolerant to me. That's a little different from going to the entire world and make disciples of all nations and baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Jesus never said to go fight people till they submit. Muhammad did. So, number 4 is that the woke progressive Marxist left as a movement and Islam as a religious movement both despise Christianity. So, in case you can't tell, I'm a Christian. This has been obvious to me for many years. A lot of people don't want to say it because, politically, we have Muslim countries that are allies, like Saudi Arabia, for instance. We have this very important country called Turkey, which is majority Muslim, which is a member of NATO. So we have to get along on the geopolitical stage with Muslim countries. But that doesn't change the fact that the religion they espouse, as a Christian, I find simply untrue, and that it teaches things about Christianity that are simply untrue. And so on the Islamic side, to harken back to what I said a moment ago with the other point, one reason that Islamic civilization has tended to not like Christian civilization is political and military, because the Byzantines, the Franks, the Crusades were an aberration really within that history, but the Reconquista, the defeat of the Ottomans at Lepanto, and then their many invasions of Europe and trying to take Vienna. Christian civilization, whether Orthodox or Catholic, primarily has stood up to Islam and fought it to a standstill. In many cases, went on the offensive and defeated it. And so you have that, but also more on a deeper level, theologically, Christians are theologically a threat to Islam because Christians don't accept the premises of Islam, particularly regarding Jesus, and don't accept the truth of Islam. I don't care what the ecumenical Christians say. Islam, as I said in my first podcast, Allah is not the God of Christianity. There's no way. He's just not. So Islam has, on many levels, sees Christianity as an enemy, and so does the woke left. I mean, again, Marx said that religion was the opiate of the masses, and although he talked about religion, he really meant Christianity. He despised Christianity. That has increasingly become the salient issue in the Democrat Party. There's Pew data. In recent years that shows that the largest contingent of people in the Democrat Party now are non-Christians. Atheists, Muslims, Jews, and again, I'm not saying that those people can't be tolerant, but that there is a profound philosophical difference between a party that's dominated by people that are not Christians, which is the Democrat Party, and a party that still is dominated by Christians, which is the Republican Party. Now, again, that doesn't make the Republican Party infallible, and I don't think that it's a Christian party. But again, there's a profound philosophical difference there. The party on the left is democrated. The Democrat Party is dominated by progressivism, which is basically Marxism in drag, sometimes literally. So it's inimical to Christianity. I mean, you've seen these shooters in recent years. Again, these trans shooters. They have been taught that Christians are their enemies, that Christianity is their enemy, because they won't accept their delusional premises. And look, I don't think there's such a thing as a trans person. You cannot wake up one day and decide you're going to be the opposite sex, which is almost always going from male to female. They think you don't usually go the other way. Just because you have a little help from your surgeon friends who are willing to get paid a lot of money. Thank God that's changing. But in the recent years, surgeons have been willing to get paid a lot of money in order chop certain parts off and let people engage in the delusion that they're changing their gender. That doesn't make it reality. It's still a delusion. And so, just like when you have people being told there's a genocide simply because people won't say I accept you as a transgender, people are delusional in thinking they can change their gender. These people are wounded and broken and need help, but they are delusional. And I think far too often there are other things at work there, spiritual forces that are not good, that have influenced those people, certainly the leadership. So this is why, and those forces don't like Christianity. So you have those very strong in the Marxist far left, which have again increasingly infiltrated the sort of mainstream left in America. And of course, on the other side, Islam, which also despises Christianity for the reasons I previously mentioned. So we may be in a new phase of terrorism now because, again, we increasingly have a disproportionate amount of terrorism being committed by people that are trans or trans adjacent or trans sympathetic. And we need to figure out a way to deal with that. And I saw where President Trump is thinking about, for instance, naming Antifa as a terrorist organization. I don't quite know why he didn't do that in his first term. That probably would be helpful if you can get around the so-called legal objections to that with doing that. It would be helpful to do that. But anyway, those are my 4 characteristics that I think both the left, the woke progressive Marxist left, and Islam share. So let me know what you think, and I hope that maybe was a bit enlightening. Take care.